The land lies under a pale winter light. Clouds move slowly, their edges blurring into the cold air, casting shifting shadows across the ground. There is no hum of insects, no rush of flowing rivers, only the long, steady whisper of wind across frozen soil. It is 20,000 years before the present, during the height of the last glacial maximum. At this point in Earth's history, ice covers more than a quarter of the planet's land surface. Two massive sheets dominate the northern hemisphere: the Laurentide ice sheet in North America and the Fenno-Scandinavian ice sheet across northern Europe and western Russia. In places, they rise more than 3 kilometers above the land they cover, pressing down with unimaginable weight. The seas are far lower than in the present. With so much water locked in ice, the ocean's surface lies around 120 meters below today's level. What are now shallow coastal waters are exposed as broad plains, crisscrossed by braided rivers. The English Channel does not yet exist. Britain is joined to continental Europe by a cold, grassy expanse. Across Asia, the island of Japan is connected to the mainland, and in Southeast Asia, large land masses link areas now separated by sea. Animals and humans alike travel across these regions, unaware of the oceans that will one day reclaim them. The climate is colder, but also drier. Paradoxically, much of the Ice Age world receives less snowfall than modern polar regions. Moisture is scarce, locked away in glaciers and frozen ground. The air holds a fine dust, carried over long distances from regions where glacial winds grind rock into powder. This dust settles across the steppe, enriching the soil, but offering little relief from the barren conditions. Beyond the glaciers stretches the Mammoth Steppe, the most extensive biome on Earth during this period. It covers Europe, Northern Asia, and Alaska, forming an unbroken belt of grassland and tundra. Unlike modern tundra, it is surprisingly rich in plant life. Short grasses, sedges, and flowering herbs thrive during the brief summer months, providing food for immense herds of grazing animals. Trees are rare, except in more southern latitudes, or along river valleys sheltered from the wind. Across this steppe, life moves slowly but persistently. Woolly mammoths roam in family groups, their thick coats insulating them against the cold. Each mammoth has a layer of fat beneath its skin, up to 10 centimeters thick, to store energy and retain heat. Their long, curved tusks serve not only in defense, but also in foraging, sweeping snow aside to reach the grasses beneath. Steppe bison move in herds, their muscular frames adapted for plowing through deep snow. Wild horses graze in open areas, their hooves breaking through the crust to uncover food. Reindeer migrate with the seasons, feeding on lichen during the harshest months. Predators follow in the wake of these herds. The cave lion, larger than any living big cat, stalks the steppe in small prides. Dire wolves travel in packs, working together to bring down prey far larger than themselves. The saber-toothed cat, though rarer in these regions, remains a powerful ambush hunter in the warmer parts of the continents. Scavengers, from hyenas to Arctic foxes, roam widely, their survival dependent on the fortunes of others. Humans, too, inhabit this landscape. They live in small, mobile bands, following the movements of the herds and the changing seasons. Shelters vary. Some groups occupy caves, whose walls they decorate with images of the animals that sustain them. Others build circular huts from mammoth bones, covered with hides for insulation. Fire is essential, both for warmth and for cooking the meat that provides most of their calories. Clothing is crafted from fur and leather, sewn with bone needles, layered for protection against the wind. Daily life is shaped by constant movement. Hunting requires coordination, knowledge of animal behavior, and the skill to use weapons effectively. Stone tools are shaped from flint or chert, sometimes hafted to wooden shafts with sinew and resin. Fishing is practiced where rivers remain unfrozen, and gathering plants supplements the diet during the short summer. Every decision, where to camp, when to travel, what to hunt, is made with the climate and the ice in mind. The glaciers themselves are restless giants. Though they appear still, they flow outward under their own weight, carving valleys and grinding rock to fine sediment. Meltwater streams cut channels through the ice, carrying silt far downstream. In summer, the edges of the ice sheets sometimes form vast, temporary lakes held back by walls of frozen water. When these ice dams fail, floods roar across the land, reshaping valleys in a matter of hours. The reason for this frozen world lies in the subtle mechanics of Earth's orbit. Over tens of thousands of years, the planet's path around the sun changes. Its shape, its tilt, and the timing of its closest approach all shift in repeating cycles. These Milankovitch cycles alter the way sunlight is distributed across the planet. When summers in the high latitudes are cooler, snow from winter fails to melt completely, and ice begins to accumulate year after year. Over millennia, the ice expands, reflecting more sunlight into space, which in turn cools the planet further. This feedback loop locks the Earth into its icy state until the cycles shift again and the glaciers slowly retreat. In the southern hemisphere, the picture is different. Glaciers extend over the southern Andes, parts of New Zealand's South Island, and the mountains of Tasmania. In Antarctica, the ice sheet grows thicker and more extensive, but much of the surrounding ocean remains free of permanent sea ice. Australia is cooler and drier, its interior turning to desert. Africa's tropical forests shrink, replaced in many areas by grasslands. Back in the northern steppe, the light begins to fade. The sun drops lower toward the horizon, and the temperature falls with it. Shadows lengthen across the plains, and the outlines of distant herds soften in the haze of frost. As night approaches, the air grows even stiller. The stars will rise bright and sharp, untouched by haze or artificial light. In this world, the slow turning of the sky is a reminder of time's vastness, of cycles measured not in days or years, but in ages. The age of ice will not last forever. It is part of a larger rhythm, one that has come and gone many times in Earth's past. But for now, here in this moment, the reign of ice is at its peak. The glaciers stand unmoving to the eye, yet they are always in motion. The wind drifts endlessly across the plains. Life moves with patience and purpose. This is the Earth as it was, colder, drier, quieter, a planet in the deep, slow breath of winter. Chapter 2: The Rhythm of the Ice. The cold of the Ice Age did not arrive all at once. It was not a sudden event, but the slow unfolding of a planetary rhythm. Over thousands of years, snow that fell in winter failed to melt completely in the summer. Each year, a thin layer remained, compacting under the weight of the next. Snow turned to fern, and fern to ice, until entire landscapes were covered in a frozen mass that moved under its own weight. The story begins far from the ice itself, in the sky above. Earth's journey around the sun is not fixed. Its orbit changes shape over cycles lasting tens of thousands of years. Sometimes the path is nearly circular. Other times it stretches into a more elongated ellipse. This change, known as orbital eccentricity, affects how far Earth is from the Sun at different times of the year. Alongside this, the tilt of Earth's axis shifts slightly over a period of about 41,000 years. A greater tilt means stronger seasons, warmer summers, colder winters. A smaller tilt softens those differences, making summers cooler and less able to melt the winter's snow. A third cycle, called precession, is the slow wobble of Earth's axis, like a spinning top turning in slow motion. This wobble changes the timing of the seasons relative to Earth's position in its orbit, influencing how much sunlight reaches the high latitudes in summer. These three patterns, eccentricity, tilt, and precession, are together called the Milankovitch cycles. Named after the Serbian scientist Milutin Milankovitch, they work in combination, sometimes reinforcing each other, sometimes canceling out. When their effects align to reduce summer warmth in the northern hemisphere, ice sheets begin to grow. But orbital changes alone are not enough to create the vast frozen world of the last glacial maximum. They set the stage, but the climate has its own amplifiers. As ice expands, it reflects more sunlight back into space, a process called albedo. The brighter the planet becomes, the cooler it grows, encouraging more ice to form. The atmosphere also changes. During glacial periods, levels of carbon dioxide and methane fall. These greenhouse gases help trap heat, so their decline means less warmth remains at the surface. The reasons for these drops are complex. Colder oceans absorb more carbon dioxide. Changes in ocean circulation bury carbon in deep water, and shifts in vegetation alter the balance of gases exchanged with the air. The oceans, too, play a central role. They store and transport immense amounts of heat. In a glacial world, patterns of circulation change. Cold, dense water sinks near the poles, while currents that normally carry warmth to high latitudes weaken. Sea ice forms more extensively in winter, acting as a lid that reduces the exchange of heat and moisture between ocean and atmosphere. Volcanoes leave their mark as well. Large eruptions can inject ash and sulfur into the stratosphere, reflecting sunlight and causing temporary cooling. Over long timescales, volcanic activity releases carbon dioxide, slowly influencing climate balance. Even small shifts in the balance between volcanic emissions and the weathering of rock on land can, over millennia, tilt the climate toward ice or warmth. The result of all these processes working together is a cycle, a slow heartbeat of the planet. Ice ages advance and retreat in a pattern repeated many times over the past 2.5 million years. The growth of an ice sheet can take tens of thousands of years. Its retreat is often quicker, as rising temperatures melt ice from above and warmer oceans erode it from below. During the current Ice Age cycle, the last glacial period began around 115,000 years ago. For much of that time, ice slowly expanded, interrupted by brief warm intervals. By 20,000 years ago, the ice had reached its maximum, covering 1/3 of the Earth's land area. Even at their height, the ice sheets were never still. They advanced and retreated season by season, responding to changes in snowfall, temperature, and the flow of meltwater beneath. In summer, the margins of the ice softened, releasing streams that carved channels through the land. In winter, those channels froze again, locked under a surface that seemed unchanging. The rhythm of the ice is slow, but it is not eternal. Already at the peak of the last glacial maximum, the cycles of orbit were shifting once more. Summers in the far north began to grow slightly warmer. Over the next several thousand years, this subtle change would gather momentum, tipping the balance toward retreat. The rain of ice would begin to loosen, though in this moment, here in the deep cold of 20,000 years ago, that future is still distant. Chapter 3: The Face of the Ice Age Earth. At the height of the last glacial maximum, the map of the world would be unrecognizable to modern eyes. Continents held their familiar shapes, but the boundaries between land and sea had shifted far outward. The oceans, drawn down by the weight of the great ice sheets, were more than 100 meters lower than today. Continental shelves, those shallow zones that now lie beneath the waves, stood exposed as wide, flat plains. Across the northern hemisphere, the ice was a continent unto itself. In North America, The Laurentide ice sheet stretched from the high Arctic south to the middle latitudes of what is now the United States. It covered all of Canada, the Great Lakes region, and extended into New England and the Midwest. In places, it reached depths of 3 kilometers, pressing down on the land so heavily that the crust itself sank under the load. To the west, another massive glacier, the Cordilleran ice sheet, lay draped over the mountains of Alaska, British Columbia, and the Yukon. Its frozen mass spilled down valleys, merging in places with the Laurentide to form an unbroken wall of ice. In between, narrow ice-free corridors existed only intermittently, their appearance and disappearance shaping the routes of both animals and humans across the continent. Across the Atlantic, Europe wore its own crown of ice. The Fenno-Scandinavian ice sheet covered Scandinavia, Finland, the Baltic region, and parts of northern Germany and Poland. It extended eastward across Russia and south into what is now the United Kingdom, then still joined to mainland Europe. In the Alps, the Pyrenees, and the Carpathians, separate mountain glaciers flowed into valleys, sometimes joining the larger ice sheets.
Asia, too, bore vast regions of cold. While much of Siberia remained ice-free, its dry climate unable to sustain glaciers, the land was locked in permafrost and swept by fierce winds. The Himalayas, the Altai, and other mountain ranges carried thick glaciers, feeding braided rivers that wound across the high plateaus. In the southern hemisphere, ice mantled the Andes far down into Chile and Argentina. Glaciers poured from the high mountains toward the lowlands, carving deep U-shaped valleys in their descent. New Zealand's South Island lay partly glaciated, its southern Alps capped year-round in white. In Tasmania, mountain glaciers spread across the central highlands, leaving behind moraines and cirques still visible today. Where the ice ended, different landscapes unfolded. The mammoth steppe stretched from Spain to eastern Siberia, across Beringia, the land bridge that connected Asia to North America, and down into Alaska and the Yukon. This was a world of grass, sedge, and low shrubs, treeless but rich in plant species compared to modern tundra. It supported herds of grazing animals that numbered in the millions. In North America south of the ice, the Great Plains extended farther north than today, their tall grasses replaced by cold steppe. Forests retreated to more temperate latitudes, compressed into smaller ranges where winters were milder. In East Asia, open grasslands covered much of northern China and Mongolia, while the wetter south maintained forests and wetlands. The deserts of the Ice Age were not always where they are now. With less evaporation from cooler oceans, some modern arid zones were wetter, their lakes fuller. In Africa, for example, parts of the Sahara held seasonal grasslands, and Lake Chad expanded to many times its modern size. In contrast, regions dependent on monsoons, such as the Indian subcontinent, often saw weaker rainfall, leading to drier conditions.
The coastlines traced new shapes across the globe. The North Sea was not a sea at all, but a vast plain crisscrossed by rivers, home to herds and hunters. In Southeast Asia, the Sundershelf formed an enormous landmass linking Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and the mainland. Far to the north, the shallow waters of the Bering Strait were replaced by Beringia, a broad expanse of grassland that allowed humans, mammoths, and other species to move between Asia and the Americas. The glaciers reshaped the land beneath them. Their movement carved deep valleys, smoothed bedrock, and left behind ridges of rock and debris called moraines. Where the ice retreated, it sometimes left behind vast basins that would become lakes. The Great Lakes of North America owe their existence to this glacial sculpting, as do countless smaller lakes across Canada, Scandinavia, and Russia. In mountainous regions, glaciers hollowed amphitheater-like bowls known as cirques, cut knife-edged ridges called arêtes, and left behind jagged peaks that pierced the sky. Elsewhere, they scoured the land into gently rolling plains, strewn with boulders carried far from their original homes. Rivers, too, took on different courses. Glacial meltwater carved wide valleys, carrying silt and gravel downstream to form braided channels. Some of these rivers ended in vast proglacial lakes held in place by ice dams. When those dams failed, the resulting floods were among the most powerful natural events in Earth's history, scouring canyons and depositing enormous fields of sediment. Above all, the Ice Age Earth was a planet of contrasts. Between the frozen silence of the high latitudes and the seasonal rhythms of grasslands further south, between the sculpted peaks of mountain ranges and the wide, flat expanses of exposed continental shelf. It was a world connected by land bridges and open plains, where the paths of humans and animals crossed continents without the barriers of modern seas. This face of the earth would not last. The ice would retreat, the seas would rise, and the continents would take on their modern outlines. But in this moment, during the last glacial maximum, the shape of the planet was that of a colder, drier, yet strangely abundant world, a world balanced on the edge of change. Chapter 4. The Climate of the Ice Age. The climate of the Ice Age was a complex and shifting system, one that influenced every corner of the Earth, from the frozen poles to the relatively milder tropics. Though the average global temperature was roughly 4 to 7 degrees Celsius lower than today, these averages concealed dramatic differences from region to region. In the polar areas, temperatures plummeted far below what humans experience in modern winters, creating conditions in which the very air felt sharp, dry, and inhospitable. Mid-latitudes faced shorter summers and prolonged winters, while tropical regions experienced milder cooling, a subtle reminder that even areas bathed in constant sunlight were not completely untouched by the Ice Age's reach. These temperature shifts, though they may seem modest in numerical terms, fundamentally changed the distribution of life, the flow of rivers, the growth of forests, and the structure of entire ecosystems. Wind and atmospheric circulation were profoundly influenced by the presence of massive ice sheets. The Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets in North America and the Fenno-Scandinavian ice sheet in Europe acted as enormous cold engines, pushing dense, chilled air across vast expanses of land. Katabatic winds, heavy and relentless, moved downward from the ice into valleys and plains, shaping the land by transporting dust, snow, and fine sediments. These winds, strong enough to affect even the formation of dunes and loess deposits far from the glaciers themselves, were more than a physical force. They were a vital factor in determining the movement of both plants and animals. In many regions, wind patterns shifted storm tracks, altering where and when precipitation fell, creating microclimates of unexpected dryness or wetness, and influencing seasonal abundance in subtle but crucial ways.
Precipitation itself was highly variable, depending on proximity to ice, elevation, and prevailing winds. Areas adjacent to ice sheets often received heavy snowfall that fed the glaciers, allowing them to expand, while more distant regions might experience extreme dryness, leading to vast open steppes or semi-arid plains. Monsoons in Asia, which today provide predictable rainfall crucial for agriculture, were weaker or altered, dramatically changing the growth of vegetation and the availability of water. In Africa, fluctuations in rainfall led to temporary grasslands and shallow lakes appearing in regions such as the Sahara, which today is predominantly desert. The oceans, too, had a controlling influence. Colder polar waters slowed currents, redistributing heat less efficiently and altering winds and storms across continents. Lower sea levels, over 100 meters below modern levels, exposed continental shelves, forming natural bridges and migration corridors for animals and humans, and changing the shape of coastlines dramatically. The seasonal rhythm of the Ice Age was marked by contrasts that were both subtle and extreme. Summers were brief and cool, often failing to fully melt accumulated snow in the higher latitudes. The sun remained low even at its zenith, providing limited warmth and creating landscapes where thawing was patchy and slow. Winters, in contrast, were long, dark, and bitterly cold. Snow could persist for up to 9 months in northern regions, and frost extended far into the warmer months. Sunlight reflected off vast snowfields, intensifying the chill, while lakes and rivers, partially frozen, created localized climates of damp cold. Even in regions distant from ice sheets, winds and storms could generate sudden cold snaps or intense blizzards, creating constant challenges for animals and humans alike.
The Ice Age was far from uniform, characterized instead by variability and intermittent warmth. Periods known as interstadials brought temporary rises in temperature, melting snow in some areas, swelling rivers, and allowing vegetation to flourish. These brief warm spells were crucial for the migration of animals such as mammoths, reindeer, and bison, which followed the availability of food across vast distances. Humans, too, adapted their movements to these seasonal and climatic shifts, following rivers, open plains, and wildlife corridors, while developing increasingly sophisticated tools, clothing, and shelters to cope with both cold and unpredictability. Glacial lakes, formed by melting ice, played an important role in shaping local climates. They stored heat during warmer months, generated fog and localized wind currents, and occasionally released icebergs that introduced sudden chilling events, reminding all living beings of the delicate balance between land, water, and ice. Even areas free from direct glacial coverage were shaped by the Ice Age's climate. The mammoth steppe of Eurasia, stretching across continents, was dominated by hardy grasses, mosses, and low shrubs, with trees largely absent in the cold, windy conditions.
Herbivores adapted to these open landscapes, developing thick fur and seasonal migrations, while predators followed the herds, adjusting their hunting strategies to the seasonal ebb and flow of prey. Humans likewise adapted culturally and technologically, learning to build shelters, sew insulated clothing, and develop tools capable of both hunting and processing large animals in harsh conditions. The persistence of life in these environments required acute observation, constant movement, and careful management of resources, revealing an intricate interplay between climate and survival. Ice sheets were dynamic, their margins advancing and retreating with changing temperatures and precipitation. These movements created landscapes marked by moraines, drumlins, and erratic boulders, as well as temporary glacial lakes that expanded and contracted according to meltwater availability. When ice dams failed, sudden floods reshaped valleys and deposited sediments across long distances, leaving dramatic evidence of climate-driven forces at work. Seasonal thawing and refreezing cycles carved rivers, reformed lakes, and created fertile floodplains, which in turn supported plant growth and attracted animals. Storms, shaped by the interaction between cold continental air and warmer maritime currents, could sweep across entire regions, altering snow cover, erosion patterns, and soil distribution.
Even in what may appear to be a harsh, inhospitable world, life adapted creatively. Edge zones near ice sheets offered grazing opportunities, while river valleys, glacial lake shores, and intermittent forests provided shelter and food. The interplay between cold, wind, snow, and water created a complex mosaic of habitats, each demanding unique adaptations. Animals and humans responded with migration, hibernation, seasonal breeding, and technological innovation. Flora, too, adapted, with plants capable of surviving frost, low moisture, and brief growing seasons dominating the landscape, forming the foundation of ecosystems that could support enormous herbivores and their predators. The Ice Age climate was ultimately a world of extremes and contrasts. It was cold, yet full of pockets of warmth, harsh, yet filled with life, challenging, yet rich with opportunity for adaptation and survival. It shaped landscapes, directed the flow of rivers, determined the distribution of species, and influenced the patterns of human movement and cultural development. The winds, oceans, ice, and sun worked in concert, sometimes slowly, sometimes dramatically, creating a dynamic, ever-changing planet in which life persevered. Even thousands of years later, the imprints of these climatic patterns remain, visible in the valleys, plains, and coastlines we see today, a testament to a time when the Earth was colder, wilder, and profoundly alive with the rhythms of the Ice Age.
Chapter 5: Survival in a Frozen World. The Ice Age was not only a time of extreme climate and vast glaciers, but also a period in which animal life adapted, flourished, and migrated in response to the immense challenges imposed by cold, wind, and changing landscapes. The megafauna of this era, often towering and imposing, were perfectly suited to endure the harsh conditions of ice and snow. Their physical characteristics and behaviors honed by thousands of generations of survival in an unforgiving world. Mammoths, for example, stood as icons of the Ice Age. Their enormous size, long curved tusks, and thick, shaggy coats allowing them to traverse vast expanses of tundra and steppe. Beneath their fur, layers of fat insulated them against temperatures that would have frozen most other animals, while their trunks enabled them to strut bark, dig through snow, and manipulate the environment to access food. These creatures traveled in herds, moving in synchrony with the seasons, following vegetation growth and seeking shelter from relentless winds. Their movements shaped the landscapes, trampling vegetation, creating paths, and even influencing soil composition through their grazing and migration. Alongside the mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses roamed the open plains, similarly adapted with thick coats and a layer of fat to withstand the cold. Unlike mammoths, their primary method of foraging involved grazing on grasses and low vegetation, sometimes digging through frost-hardened ground to reach roots. Herd behavior was also crucial for their survival, as it provided protection against predators and allowed them to locate scarce food sources during the long winters. Smaller herbivores, such as the steppe bison and the reindeer, exhibited seasonal migrations that took them from open plains to sheltered valleys and forest edges, where they could find grasses, lichens, and mosses that survived beneath the snow. The constant search for food dictated patterns of movement, reproduction, and interaction, and these patterns, repeated over thousands of years, shaped the genetic and behavioral traits of entire species. Predators, in turn, adapted to the abundance and behavior of herbivores. Wolves, for instance, evolved cooperative hunting strategies, tracking and coordinating attacks on herds of reindeer or bison. Their keen senses of smell, sight, and hearing allowed them to locate prey across vast frozen landscapes, while their social structures provided efficiency and protection in a world where survival was never guaranteed. Large cats, such as cave lions and saber-toothed cats, relied on ambush and strength to take down the biggest herbivores, their muscular bodies and powerful jaws optimized for sudden bursts of speed and overwhelming force. Even smaller predators, including foxes and weasels, played crucial roles in maintaining ecological balance, hunting rodents and other small animals that could survive beneath the snow and ice, sustaining food chains in ways that were subtle but essential.
Birds of the Ice Age adapted in equally remarkable ways. Some migratory species followed seasonal patterns, traveling thousands of kilometers to exploit fleeting northern resources during short summers. Others, such as snowy owls and ptarmigans, remained in cold regions year-round, relying on camouflage, silent flight, and opportunistic hunting to endure winters that could last months. Waterfowl congregated in unfrozen lakes and rivers, forming temporary breeding colonies during brief periods of abundance, their life cycles tightly synchronized with the rhythms of ice and thaw. Even aquatic life reflected the influence of glacial climates. Rivers and lakes, often fed by glacial meltwater, supported populations of fish adapted to cold, oxygen-rich waters. Salmon, trout, and other species followed the seasonal flows of rivers, migrating upstream to spawn during the limited warm months, while in deeper lakes, cold-tolerant species persisted beneath thick layers of ice. These aquatic ecosystems, though less visible than the towering mammals of the plains, were no less critical for the sustenance of life, providing essential food sources for humans, birds, and carnivores alike. The Ice Age also fostered remarkable diversity within plant-eating insects and smaller organisms whose presence shaped soil quality, plant regeneration, and the structure of the vegetation that supported herbivores. beetles, moths, and other cold-adapted insects carried out essential roles in pollination and decomposition, their life cycles timed to the fleeting summers and long winters. Even the microbes in soil and water, invisible to the naked eye, contributed to the productivity of ecosystems, facilitating nutrient cycles and enabling survival under extreme conditions. Humans, too, were influenced by the rich tapestry of Ice Age animal life. The availability of large herbivores such as mammoths and bison dictated hunting strategies, migration routes, and the development of tools capable of processing meat, hides, and bones. Humans observed, tracked, and learned from these animals, developing knowledge systems that allowed them to predict seasonal movements, understand behavioral patterns, and exploit ecological niches. Art, such as cave paintings depicting mammoths, horses, and predators, reflects not only cultural expression, but also a deep engagement with the natural world, evidence that humans were both participants in and observers of the Ice Age ecosystems.
Even the interactions between species were influenced by the climate. Predation pressure, competition for scarce resources, and seasonal availability of food created intricate networks of survival. Herbivores often shaped the growth of vegetation through selective grazing, while predators influenced herd behavior, which in turn affected soil distribution and plant regeneration. The entire web of life was interconnected, with each species responding to environmental cues and the presence of others, a dynamic balance maintained in the face of harsh climatic challenges. The Ice Age world, though often imagined as lifeless and frozen, was instead teeming with activity, migration, adaptation, and survival strategies. Every step taken by a mammoth, every flight of a bird, every hunt by a predator, and every movement of humans was shaped by climate, landscape, and the presence of other living beings. The fauna of this era were not just passive survivors, but active participants in the shaping of their environment, molding the land, influencing vegetation, and even impacting future ecological succession. The Ice Age, in essence, was a time of immense resilience, creativity, and interconnectedness, a period in which life persisted in extraordinary ways, enduring the cold, thriving amidst challenges, and leaving traces that echo across the millennia.
Chapter 6: Life Amidst the Cold. While the Ice Age is often remembered for its massive glaciers and formidable animals, the plant life of this era was equally remarkable, demonstrating resilience and adaptation to extreme climates. Vegetation shaped the very landscape and supported the complex web of herbivores and smaller creatures that depended on it. Vast stretches of tundra and steppe dominated the northern regions, where cold-tolerant grasses, sedges, and mosses thrived despite frigid temperatures and short growing seasons. These hardy plants formed the foundation of the ecosystem, providing essential nourishment for herds of mammoths, reindeer, and bison. Their ability to survive beneath layers of snow and withstand frost allowed them to regrow quickly during brief summer months, sustaining the food chains that humans and predators relied upon. Shrubs and low-lying bushes were scattered across the plains, often in sheltered valleys or along riverbanks, offering both food and cover for smaller animals. Willows, dwarf birches, and junipers were common, their growth forms adapted to resist the harsh winds and cold. In many areas, lichens and mosses carpeted rocks and soil, their slow but steady growth forming crucial sources of nutrients for herbivores during long winters. These plants, though unassuming, played a pivotal role in the ecosystem, sustaining life through their persistence and remarkable ability to survive under conditions that would have been lethal to less resilient species. In more temperate regions, where glaciers did not completely dominate the landscape, pockets of coniferous forests and mixed woodlands appeared, offering shelter and food for a variety of animals. Pine, spruce, and fir trees formed dense groves, while deciduous species such as oak and elm survived in smaller clusters. These forests were dynamic and often fragmented, their distribution influenced by microclimates, soil conditions, and glacial retreat. Trees provided not only food in the form of leaves, seeds, and bark, but also protection from predators and harsh weather, creating microhabitats where birds, insects, and mammals could thrive.
The Ice Age also influenced the reproductive strategies of plants. Many species relied on wind pollination, while others depended on insects and small animals to carry seeds or pollen across frozen landscapes. The short growing seasons meant that flowering, pollination, and seed dispersal had to occur in precise and synchronized timing, ensuring the survival of the next generation. Seasonal changes shaped plant behavior, dictating cycles of dormancy and growth, with roots and underground stems storing energy to survive months of cold when photosynthesis was impossible. Rivers, lakes, and wetlands, often fed by glacial meltwater, supported a diverse array of aquatic plants. Algae, pondweeds, and water lilies flourished during the brief summer months, forming the basis of freshwater ecosystems that sustained fish, amphibians, and birds. Even frozen surfaces were not devoid of life. Ice-covered lakes trapped nutrients, creating habitats for microorganisms that would become essential food sources once spring thawed the water. These aquatic plants contributed to the productivity and stability of Ice Age landscapes, linking terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems in a delicate balance. Human interaction with plant life was an equally vital aspect of survival. Early humans learned to identify edible plants, roots, berries, and seeds, supplementing their diets when hunting was scarce. Knowledge of which plants could be consumed raw, cooked, or stored for later use was passed down through generations, forming a deep understanding of the natural world. Additionally, plants provided materials for shelter, clothing, and tools, with bark, wood, and fibers utilized in ingenious ways to adapt to the cold. Even in areas dominated by ice, life found a way. Pioneer species, such as mosses and lichens, colonized bare rock and soil exposed by retreating glaciers, slowly transforming the landscape and creating conditions for other plants to establish themselves. Over centuries, these processes contributed to soil formation, nutrient cycling, and the gradual recolonization of areas previously inhospitable. The resilience and adaptability of Ice Age flora mirrored that of the animals and humans that depended on them, forming the foundation of survival in a frozen world. The Ice Age landscape, with its seemingly stark expanses of tundra, steppe, and fragmented forest, was far from lifeless. Every plant, from the tiniest moss to the tallest conifer, played an integral role in sustaining ecosystems. They shaped habitats, supported herbivores, influenced predator patterns, and provided humans with essential resources for survival. Their presence was a testament to the ability of life to endure, adapt, and thrive even under the harshest conditions, creating a rich and intricate world beneath the ice. Chapter 7: Survival and Ingenuity. The Ice Age was a world shaped not only by glaciers, snow, and powerful animals, but also by the ingenuity and resilience of early humans. These communities faced a landscape of extreme cold, scarce resources, and constant challenges. Survival demanded not only physical endurance, but also intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to read the environment with precision. Humans were not mere observers of this frozen world. They actively interacted with it, developing strategies, tools, and social structures that allowed them to thrive despite the harsh conditions. One of the most critical aspects of survival was clothing. Early humans relied on the hides and furs of animals, using them to create garments that insulated against the cold. Mammoth hides, thick and long-haired, were particularly prized, providing warmth even during the harshest winters. The preparation of these materials required skill. Hides had to be carefully treated, stretched, and sewn, often using bone needles and sinew as thread. The use of layered clothing, along with boots and gloves made from animal skins, enabled humans to travel long distances in freezing temperatures, hunt efficiently, and protect themselves from frostbite and exposure. Shelter was another essential element. Humans constructed temporary camps from natural materials such as wood, bone, and animal skins, often situating them near water sources, abundant food supplies, or natural shelters like caves. Caves themselves became invaluable refuges, protecting against wind, snow, and predators. Inside these shelters, evidence of early human life reveals sophisticated planning. Hearths provided warmth and a place to cook. Storage areas were used to keep food safe, and even walls were adorned with art depicting animals, hunts, and symbolic patterns. These paintings reflect not only creativity, but also a deep connection with the surrounding world, an attempt to interpret, understand, and perhaps influence the forces of nature that govern daily life. Hunting strategies were vital to human survival. The megafauna of the Ice Age, mammoths, bison, reindeer, and others, provided food, clothing, and materials for tools and shelter. Hunting required careful observation, cooperation, and knowledge of animal behavior. Humans developed sophisticated weapons such as spears, atlatls, and later bows, allowing them to take down prey efficiently and safely. Tracking skills were honed to perfection. Understanding migration patterns, seasonal grazing areas, and herd behaviors allowed early humans to anticipate the movements of animals and plan their hunts accordingly. Group cooperation was essential, as coordinated attacks increased success rates while minimizing risk. Beyond hunting, humans gathered plant resources, supplementing their diets with roots, berries, seeds, and nuts. Knowledge of edible versus toxic plants was crucial, and this understanding was passed down through generations, forming the basis of early ethnobotanical knowledge. Storage techniques, such as burying food in cold soil or drying meat, allowed humans to endure periods of scarcity, especially during long winters when hunting was less productive. The combination of hunting and gathering ensured a varied diet that provided the energy necessary to survive in a world of extremes. Tool-making demonstrated remarkable innovation and adaptability. Humans crafted stone, bone, and wood implements with precision, each designed for a specific purpose: cutting, scraping, piercing, or digging. Tools were often modified and refined over generations, reflecting trial, error, and accumulated knowledge. Even the use of fire exemplified ingenuity. Controlled fire provided warmth, protection from predators, the ability to cook food, and a means to harden wooden tools. Mastery of fire was not merely survival, but a transformative technology that shaped human culture, social interaction, and day-to-day life. Social structures also played a crucial role. Humans lived in groups that provided security, shared labor, and facilitated the passing of knowledge. Elders and experienced hunters guided decision-making, while younger members contributed strength, energy, and learning capacity. Cooperation extended to raising children, preparing food, and defending against threats, creating networks of interdependence that strengthened the chances of survival. Communication, likely through gestures, vocalizations, and later more structured language, allowed for coordination and the sharing of information about resources, dangers, and strategies.
The spiritual and symbolic lives of Ice Age humans were intertwined with survival. Cave art, figurines, and ritual sites suggested that humans sought to understand and influence the forces around them. Art may have served practical purposes, such as teaching hunting techniques or recording seasonal patterns, as well as expressing beliefs about life, death, and the natural world. This connection to the environment reflects a profound awareness of the interdependence between humans, animals, and plants, a recognition that survival depended not only on skill and strength, but also on understanding and respecting the balance of the ecosystem. Ice Age humans were also remarkable for their mobility. They followed migratory herds, explored vast territories, and adapted to changing climates and landscapes. Seasonal movements allowed access to food, water, and resources while avoiding areas of extreme danger or resource depletion. These patterns of migration laid the foundations for the spread of human populations across continents, demonstrating adaptability, resilience, and an ever-growing capacity to thrive in diverse environments. The story of human life in the Ice Age is one of intelligence, perseverance, and interconnection. Humans were neither passive victims of harsh conditions nor solitary predators. They were active participants in the ecosystems around them. Their survival relied on observation, adaptation, and cooperation, creating a legacy of ingenuity that would shape the future of the species. In a frozen world where every day presented new challenges, humans not only endured, they innovated, explored, and created, leaving traces of their lives that echo across time, offering insight into the remarkable capacity of our ancestors to adapt and flourish in the most extreme of circumstances. Chapter 8: Life in a frozen world. During the Ice Age, early humans lived in a world of contrasts: vast frozen plains, towering glaciers, dense forests, and rivers that sometimes froze over yet teemed with life. Every day presented challenges, yet humans adapted to their environment with remarkable ingenuity. Their survival depended on careful observation, flexibility, and cooperation, which allowed them to thrive even as temperatures dropped and resources fluctuated. Humans developed tools and strategies that reflected a deep understanding of their surroundings. Stone tools were sharpened into spears, knives, and scrapers, each carefully shaped for specific tasks. Bone, antler, and ivory were crafted into fishing hooks, needles, and other implements. Some tools were used to hunt massive Ice Age herbivores, while others prepared hides for clothing or shelters, or processed plant materials for food. The act of tool-making was not only practical, but often social, as knowledge of crafting techniques was passed from one generation to the next. Clothing was essential for survival in the icy temperatures. Humans transformed the hides of animals they hunted into layered garments, creating insulation against wind and snow. Fur-lined boots protected their feet during long treks across frozen landscapes, while mittens and head coverings conserved vital body heat. The ingenuity of Ice Age clothing extended to the use of sinew for stitching and natural dyes to mark or decorate garments, demonstrating a combination of practicality and creativity. Shelters varied depending on available materials and the season. Caves offered natural protection and were often the site of long-term habitation, with evidence of hearths, food storage, and symbolic art. In open plains, humans constructed temporary huts using wooden frames covered with hides or grasses. In colder regions, more permanent shelters were sometimes built with mammoth bones, carefully arranged and covered with layers of fur and earth to retain warmth. Fire was central to life. It provided warmth, light, protection, and the means to cook food, transforming raw ingredients into more digestible, energy-rich meals.
Hunting was both a necessity and an art. Early humans observed animal behavior with acute attention. Tracking a herd of mammoths, bison, or reindeer required knowledge of migration patterns, feeding areas, and seasonal movement. Hunting large game was rarely done alone. Groups would work together to corner or ambush animals, often using natural features such as cliffs, narrow valleys, or frozen rivers to their advantage. Cooperation, timing, and patience were critical. Success depended on both physical skill and intelligence. Gathering supplemented hunting, providing variety and essential nutrients. Roots, tubers, berries, nuts, and leafy plants were gathered seasonally, and knowledge of edible species was carefully preserved. In some regions, early humans exploited aquatic resources, fishing in rivers and lakes, using nets, hooks, or traps made from bone and plant fibers. This combination of hunting and gathering allowed for a flexible diet capable of sustaining communities even during harsh winters. Social structures were central to survival. Small, mobile groups, often referred to as bands, relied on cooperation, shared resources, and knowledge exchange. Elders taught younger members how to make tools, recognize animal tracks,
identify edible plants, and predict seasonal changes. Stories, songs, and possibly early symbolic communication strengthened cohesion and preserved cultural knowledge. Group living not only increased efficiency in hunting and gathering, but also offered protection against predators, environmental hazards, and rival groups. Cultural expression emerged alongside survival skills. Cave paintings, carvings, and personal ornaments suggest a sense of identity, observation, and reflection. Images of animals, abstract patterns, and handprints may have served ritual purposes, recorded knowledge about hunting or seasonal patterns, or strengthened group bonds. These creative expressions show that Ice Age humans were not only focused on survival, they were observing, interpreting, and interacting with their world in ways that were intellectual, emotional, and social.
The interaction between humans and Ice Age megafauna was complex and intertwined. Humans hunted large animals, yet also depended on them for clothing, tools, and shelter. Observing predators such as wolves or saber-toothed cats helped humans avoid danger, while studying herbivore movements provided insight into food availability. These interactions created a delicate balance. Humans were both predators and participants in an intricate ecosystem, navigating survival without destabilizing the environment. Climate pressures were relentless. Glacial advances could isolate communities, reduce available grazing land for prey, and create extreme cold spells. Periodic warming allowed humans to explore new territories, but also introduced unfamiliar ecosystems and new species. Adapting to these changes required innovation, storing food, developing better clothing and shelters, and maintaining flexible social networks. The ability to respond to climate stress distinguished successful communities from those that struggled to survive. Water and terrain influenced every aspect of life. Rivers and lakes provided hydration, food, and travel routes, while plains and valleys facilitated migration. Humans were keenly aware of seasonal ice thickness, river currents, and safe crossing points. Knowledge of terrain, often passed through oral traditions and observation, allowed groups to move efficiently, avoid danger, and exploit resources sustainably. Ultimately, early humans of the Ice Age were masters of adaptation. Their lives were intertwined with the environment, with plants, animals, and the climate shaping decisions, behaviors, and innovations. They combined practical survival skills with social cohesion, creativity, and observation, creating a complex and resilient culture. Their story is not merely one of struggle, it is a testament to human ingenuity, cooperation, and the profound ability to thrive in a world of ice, wind, and unpredictable change. The legacy of Ice Age humans is preserved in their tools, shelters, and art, but also in the enduring lessons of adaptability and resilience. By studying their lives, we gain insight not only into the challenges they faced, but also into the remarkable ways they overcame them, maintaining harmony with a world that demanded respect, intelligence, and cooperation. Their journey reminds us that survival is not only about strength, but about knowledge, creativity, and the subtle understanding of the intricate connections between life and the ever-changing environment.
Chapter 9. Life amidst cold and change.
During the Ice Age, the Earth was a place of striking contrasts, where frozen expanses coexisted with pockets of life, and ecosystems had adapted to survive in an unforgiving climate. Plants, though often overlooked in popular depictions of the Ice Age, were the silent architects of survival. They shaped landscapes, stabilized soils, nourished herbivores, and indirectly supported human populations. Without them, the intricate web of Ice Age life, from tiny insects to massive mammoths, could not have endured. Across the northern continents, vegetation zones were largely determined by the extent of glacial coverage and the severity of the climate. In regions where glaciers receded, coniferous forests took root, with hardy pines, spruces, and firs dominating. These forests were not uniform. They formed patchworks interspersed with open clearings where sunlight could reach the forest floor. In these clearings, mosses, lichens, and low shrubs thrived, creating microhabitats for insects, small mammals, and birds. The trees themselves provided seeds and cones as food, shelter from harsh winds, and materials for early humans to use in fires, tools, and shelter construction. Farther north, tundra and steppe ecosystems predominated. These landscapes, characterized by low-growing vegetation, were deceptively rich. Grasses, sedges, and herbaceous plants carpeted the plains, while dwarf shrubs, mosses, and lichens covered rocky outcrops. These plants had evolved remarkable adaptations to survive freezing temperatures, limited sunlight, and thin, nutrient-poor soils. Many could photosynthesize even in cold conditions, and their low, compact growth minimized exposure to wind and frost. Seasonal changes were dramatic, with brief summers producing a burst of flowering plants, berries, and new shoots that sustained herbivores and provided vital nutrients to humans and predators alike. The tundra was a world in constant motion. Herbivores such as mammoths, bison, and reindeer grazed across the vast plains, feeding on grasses, sedges, and low shrubs. Their grazing patterns shaped plant communities, influencing which species flourished and which were suppressed. Large herds helped distribute seeds and fertilize soils, creating dynamic feedback loops that maintained ecosystem health. Humans relied on this cycle, understanding that the presence of certain plants indicated nearby grazing animals and thus potential hunting opportunities. Observing plant growth, seasonal flowering, and the locations of nutrient-rich patches could mean the difference between a successful hunt and scarcity.
Wetlands, river valleys, and lake shores provided additional layers of life and diversity. Reeds, sedges, and aquatic plants supported invertebrates, fish, and amphibians, forming the basis of complex food webs. Migratory birds used these areas as feeding and nesting grounds, adding seasonal variation to the ecosystem. Humans, attuned to these environments, harvested aquatic plants, trapped fish, and hunted waterfowl. Seasonal floods replenished soils, allowing nutrient-rich silt to accumulate and support robust plant growth in surrounding areas. The interdependence between water, plants, and animals created a delicate balance that humans had to respect and understand to survive. The variety of Ice Age plants was not uniform across the globe. In milder, southern regions, mixed woodlands included both conifers and deciduous trees, such as birches, oaks, and willows. These forests offered abundant food sources, from nuts and berries to edible leaves and bark. In harsher northern climates, only the most resilient species survived. Yet even these sparse landscapes supported surprisingly rich communities of life. The distribution of plants shifted constantly with advancing and retreating ice sheets, requiring animals and humans to migrate or adapt in response to the changing availability of resources. Plants were essential for human survival in more ways than one. Humans foraged for edible leaves, roots, tubers, and berries, carefully noting which species were safe to consume and when. Fibers from certain plants were twisted into ropes or woven into mats, while bark, grasses, and reeds were used in shelter construction. Medicinal plants, though difficult to identify, were likely used to treat wounds, soothe digestive issues, or relieve pain, demonstrating an intimate understanding of local flora. Even plant-based dyes may have been used for decoration, signaling cultural and symbolic practices beyond mere survival. Fire played a crucial role in shaping plant communities. Naturally occurring fires, sparked by lightning or volcanic activity, cleared old growth and stimulated the regeneration of fire-adapted species. Humans, aware of these patterns, may have used controlled burning to encourage growth of certain plants, manage hunting grounds, or maintain open areas for easier travel. Fire not only altered vegetation, but also influenced the behavior of animals as they moved toward fresh grazing areas, creating opportunities for hunting.
Ultimately, Ice Age plants and ecosystems reveal a story of endurance, adaptation, and intricate interconnections. They were far from passive elements of the landscape. They were active participants in a complex network of life. Understanding these relationships helps us appreciate the ingenuity of humans, the resilience of herbivores and predators, and the subtle yet powerful role of vegetation in shaping the world of ice, wind, and snow. Plants formed the foundation of survival, guiding migration, supporting food webs, and offering resources that enabled humans to endure and thrive in one of Earth's most challenging eras. Chapter 10: Survival, Ingenuity, and Community in a Frozen World. During the Ice Age, humans lived in a world that was at once awe-inspiring and formidable. Vast glaciers carved the land, cold winds swept across open plains, and seasonal cycles dictated the availability of food and resources. Yet, despite these harsh conditions, humans not only survived, they thrived, adapting to the environment with ingenuity, skill, and cooperation. Understanding Ice Age human life requires exploring the many layers of survival, creativity, and cultural expression that defined this extraordinary era. Humans of the Ice Age were hunter-gatherers, deeply attuned to the natural rhythms of their surroundings. Their survival depended on a delicate balance of observation, timing, and physical skill. They tracked animals across frozen landscapes, recognizing patterns in migration, feeding, and breeding that allowed them to predict where and when to hunt. The ability to read the land was crucial. Footprints in snow, broken branches, scattered dung, and signs of grazing all communicated vital information about animal behavior.
Humans honed these skills over generations, passing knowledge orally and through practical demonstration, ensuring that each new generation could survive and thrive. Hunting was not merely a means of acquiring food. It was a sophisticated practice that required planning, cooperation, and ingenuity. Humans employed a variety of strategies tailored to different prey. Large animals, such as mammoths, bison, and reindeer, were hunted in coordinated group efforts. Drives, ambushes, and careful positioning allowed hunters to take advantage of terrain, seasonal conditions, and animal behavior. Weapons such as spears, atlatls, and later bows and arrows were crafted with precision, often from bone, wood, or stone, designed to maximize effectiveness while minimizing risk to the hunter. Small game hunting required stealth, patience, and intimate knowledge of habitats, demonstrating versatility and adaptability in human subsistence strategies. Gathering complemented hunting, providing essential nutrition and resources that were often more reliable than unpredictable hunting success. Humans collected edible plants, roots, tubers, berries, nuts, and seeds, carefully distinguishing between safe and toxic species. Seasonal patterns dictated gathering routines. Spring offered fresh greens and early tubers, summer yielded fruits and nuts, and autumn provided root vegetables and late-season berries. Wild grains, mushrooms, and lichens supplemented the diet, while shellfish, fish, and other aquatic resources added variety and protein. Gathering was not a passive activity. It required knowledge of plant life cycles, ecological relationships, and environmental cues, reflecting a deep understanding of the surrounding world. Ice Age humans were also remarkable toolmakers. Beyond weapons, they crafted tools for cutting, scraping, digging, and processing materials. Flint knapping produced sharp blades and points. Bone and antler were fashioned into needles, owls, and hooks, and wood was carved into handles, digging sticks, and shelter supports. Tools were multi-purpose, carefully maintained, and often carried over long distances, reflecting both practicality and planning. The creation and use of tools illustrate cognitive sophistication, manual dexterity, and an ability to anticipate future needs, skills that were essential for survival in unpredictable and extreme conditions. Shelter and clothing were vital to endure the cold. Humans built temporary shelters from available materials. Animal hides, bones, wood, and stones formed structures that protected against wind, snow, and rain. In some regions, caves provided natural shelter, offering stable temperatures and protection from predators. Clothing, often made from furs and hides, was adapted to local climates, layered for insulation, and secured with bone or wooden fasteners. These measures were not mere convenience. They were life-saving innovations that allowed humans to occupy regions that would otherwise have been uninhabitable. Fire was central to Ice Age human life, serving multiple essential purposes. It provided warmth, light, protection from predators, and a means to cook food, improving digestibility and nutritional value. Humans harnessed fire with skill, maintaining hearths and shelters, using embers for transportable heat sources, and strategically placing fires to drive animals during hunts. Fire also enabled social cohesion, as gatherings around a hearth became opportunities for communication, teaching, and cultural expression, reinforcing bonds that were vital for survival in harsh environments. Social structures were complex and adaptive. Humans often lived in small, mobile groups, organized around kinship, cooperation, and shared tasks. Roles may have been flexible, but cooperation was essential for hunting large game, gathering food, and maintaining shelters. Communication, whether through early language, gestures, or other symbolic forms, facilitated coordination and knowledge transfer. Social bonds were strengthened through shared labor, mutual protection, and cultural practices, reflecting an understanding that survival depended not only on individual skill, but also on community resilience. Cultural expression flourished alongside survival activities. Cave paintings, carvings, and portable art objects provide evidence of symbolic thought, aesthetic appreciation, and possibly ritual practices. Depictions of animals, hunting scenes, and abstract patterns suggest that humans sought to understand, record, and influence their environment, perhaps through spiritual or ritual means. Personal adornment, such as beads, pendants, or decorated tools, reflects identity, status, or social connection, adding a layer of meaning to everyday life. These cultural practices reveal that Ice Age humans were not merely surviving, they were reflecting, imagining, and creating within their world. Adaptation to the environment extended to seasonal mobility. Groups often followed herds and plant cycles, moving between summer and winter sites to optimize access to food and shelter. These movements required detailed knowledge of geography, weather patterns, and ecological interconnections. Humans planned for scarcity, storing food, preparing clothing, and reinforcing shelters in anticipation of harsh winters. Migration routes, temporary camps, and long-term settlements reflect a strategic approach to landscape use, blending flexibility with foresight. Interactions with animals were multifaceted. Humans hunted for sustenance, but also respected animal behavior and habitats, learning to exploit natural patterns without depleting resources entirely. Scavenging supplemented hunting, and domestication of dogs in some regions provided companionship, hunting assistance, and protection. Observing predator-prey dynamics informed hunting strategies and safety measures, illustrating a sophisticated understanding of ecosystems. The relationship between humans and animals was dynamic, reciprocal, and shaped by constant observation and adaptation. Health, nutrition, and medicine were intimately connected to environment and lifestyle. A diverse diet of meat, fish, plants, and seasonal resources provided essential nutrients, while physical activity ensured strength and endurance. Humans likely experimented with medicinal plants, using leaves, roots, and bark to treat wounds, digestive issues, and infections. Knowledge of natural remedies was vital for survival, passed down orally or through practical demonstration. Attention to hygiene, wound care, and safe food preparation helped maintain health in an unpredictable and sometimes dangerous world. Climate change continuously tested human ingenuity. Advancing glaciers, shifting vegetation, and fluctuating temperatures forced humans to adapt their strategies, relocate settlements, and modify technology. Groups that could read environmental cues, innovate tools, and cooperate effectively were more likely to survive and pass on knowledge. Cultural adaptation, technological skill, and ecological awareness became intertwined with survival, illustrating the remarkable resilience and intelligence of Ice Age humans. Ultimately, Ice Age human life was defined by observation, adaptation, and community. Humans were not passive inhabitants of a frozen landscape. They actively engaged with their environment, developing tools, strategies, and cultural practices that allowed them to thrive. Their survival depended on understanding plants, animals, climate, and geography, and on cooperation within social groups. Humans shaped and were shaped by the Ice Age world, demonstrating creativity, ingenuity, and resilience in one of the most challenging periods in Earth's history. The story of Ice Age humans is a story of balance between risk and reward, scarcity and abundance, survival and expression. It is a story of life persisting against the odds, guided by knowledge, skill, and the capacity to imagine, plan, and connect. In the frozen expanses of the Ice Age, humans carved out not just a place to live, but a way of life, leaving a legacy of adaptation, resilience, and ingenuity that echoes through the millennia.